Hi, welcome to our Governance.Business session on configuring the absence management functionality. The configuration of absence management has three parts. Configure the absence types that will be allowed in the solution. Secondly, configure the absence policies containing the different rules to be applied. And the last one is to associate those absence policies with the different users. So let's then start configuring the different absence types. To configure the different absence types, you need to configure a data type that contains that list. The data type is called sys absence types. This data type contains a hierarchical view of all the absence types that are allowed in the solution. So we'll add one more in order for you to see how to configure new absence types in Governance.Business. And here we see then that our newly created absence type parental leave is then included in the hierarchy of absence parental leave. Now we will start with the configuration of the absence policies that will be then associated with each of the users. In here, we have then the list of all the absence policies that are currently configured in the solution. We will then create a new one to demonstrate how you can create and manage those policies. By creating a new absence policy, you then have to define the different rules that are going to be applied and the different data type, the absence types that will be allowed in this absence policy. To configure all of that, you have then here a table called absence type details that will have all of those rules per absence type. So then let's start adding the different absence types that we will allow in this configuration. In here, you can then configure if these absence types are going to have automatic approval or not, or if they will be required an allowance or not. So requiring an allowance means that you will have to create an allowance that contains a number of days, okay, associated with this absence type. So the user can only schedule that absence type if that allowance is already associated with the user. Okay, so in here the scheduling type offers you the possibility of saying if this absence type will be created in if this absence type will be able to be scheduled in either hours or half days or full days. So let's then do a full day for a vacation, for example, which we will say that we will require to have a certain days of allowance in order to be able to schedule that vacation. And then here you can configure the different notifications that will be applied to each of those events. So either notify the approver that a new vacation is to be approved by that approver, or then the resource when the absence type is approved, when the absence is approved, or when it is rejected, or even a reminder, okay, for the resource to book a certain set of absences. Okay, so we will start by setting up this policy with a vacation, also setting it up with, for example, education, where we'll then have a configuration that we will have an automatic approval, and the education is also is configuring, for example, half days, and then even the parental leave that we have created before, okay, saying that we will be able to do that in hours, okay, and it also has an automatic approval. So with these configurations, we then have set up our absence policy that will then be used to associate it with the users, which will apply the different rules for each of these absence types. As a third step in this configuration, we will then associate this absence policy to a user. So let's then go to our resources and select a resource where we will use this policy. For example, let's select this one. Navigate to resource definitions, and then you have the possibility of seeing the absence policies. So currently in this user, we already have an absence policy configured. So we are going to change that absence policy. So we are going to also delete this entry over here. Okay, and then changing the absence policy. So we will select the one that we have created. And now, based on this new absence policy, we will then be able to define the different allowances based on the absence types that are defined in the policy. So those absence types required approvers for the vacation part. So in this case, what we will do is we will add a new allowance, which also imply the approvers for that allowance. So in this case, we will add, for example, vacations for 2020. The absence type, we will select the different absence types that are configured in the policy. So in this case, vacation. And then the time range that is this absence type is allowed to be booked on. So essentially the start date of when we can book this type of absence types, okay, for this type of allowance, okay, and the finish date when we will allow the absence type to be booked. So in this case, let's say that this absence type is booked from the 1st of January, okay, and to the 13th of to the 31st of March of 2021. Okay. So then the allowed days. So we will say that within this allowance, we will allow 22 days of vacations. Currently, this is open. Then we have also, if we have set up the notification reminder for the user in the absence policy, we can then select here the date of when that notification reminder is going to be sent to the user to remind him that he needs to book this type of absence type. And then we have 3 levels of approvers. So essentially the approver of those absences, and then if we want to apply any extra approvers, we can also do that. Okay, so in this case, we are going to select one of the approvers from the list of approvals. Okay, so with this, we have configured then this allowance for vacations 2020, okay, for this user, which is associated with the policy, absence policy demonstration. So let's add a new one so you can also see that we can have an overlap on the absences. So we will then add a different vacation allowance, okay, for 2021, which is going to be then allowed to be booked from the 1st of January 2021 to the 31st of March of 2022. Okay, so the same amount of days open and the same approver for now. Okay, so in this case we have the same type of allowance that we had before, but then this for 2021, and then we will have an overlap in terms of dates where we can either book vacations from 2020 or vacations from 2021, which is basically from the 1st of January 2021 to the 31st of March of 2021, which is the one that is included in the absence type of 2020. So essentially, we will be able to overlap allowances so we can be more flexible in terms of allowing the user into which allowance he wants to book these vacations on. With this configuration, the user is now ready to start booking their vacations.